Hey, good morning to everybody. Happy Tuesday. It's Daryl here. It's not so bright and early, 9 a.m. here in Connecticut on the East Coast. You guys will have to excuse the wet hair. I just jumped in the pool, 9 a.m., and it's got to be almost 100 degrees here today. It feels like a tropical rainforest. For those of you not familiar with Connecticut, it can get ridiculously humid here. Anyway, I know the rest of the country is feeling the same thing, so I won't cry about it anymore. Let's get right into this. I want to talk about critical race theory and kids. Just some observations I came up with, all right? And you can take this with a grain of salt, because granted, I don't know a whole lot about critical race theory. I'm not even going to get into it, but I just want to talk about human nature and kids, teenagers, rebellion. You see where I'm going with this yet? All right. So the Republicans, the Trumpers, conservatives are all in uproar. This is going to be a huge thing in 2022. Whenever I go to the conservative sites or conservative TV programs, because I need to know what's going on both sides. Like I've told you guys before, I always look on both sides. I don't want to be one of those people that go down the rabbit hole and just get caught in these echo chambers. I always go and see what everybody's talking about on both sides. And the conservatives are talking about critical race theory, woke people, and Joe Biden, and something about him whispering or some other nonsense about dementia or wringing his hands, but we'll save that for another video. All right, let's get into this. All right, so I started giving this some thought, and I thought back to when I was a kid, and I thought about kids and teenagers, and preteens. I thought about how I was as a kid. And I started to think, it's like maybe Republicans and conservatives are really shooting themselves in the foot here. Let me explain. All right. So as we see, the politicians and the parents, the voters that are conservative, Trump supporters, Republicans, they don't know what critical race theory is exactly, but they do not want it in their schools. They don't want poor Johnny hating himself and hating the country and feeling all guilty because he's white and all this other stuff. And like I said, I'm not going to get into that, but let's think about this, all right? Let's think about the kids here. Yeah, is anybody thinking about the children? All right, when I was a kid, the kids aren't stupid. They hear all this going on, right? They hear their parents talking about it. They hear their teachers talk about it. They see it on the news, on TV. Nobody wants them to learn about critical race theory because it's going to make them hate themselves. All right, let's just stop right there, all right? Now, you guys know about my drug addiction, right? I came from a good family. Let me tell you this. I never failed one class all through school. This is something I don't talk about often because a lot of people don't even believe it, but I scored over 1,200 on the SATs. I never failed one class all through high school. I did really good in school. Like you guys know, my father died when I was 9, but I was very respectful towards my mother. I considered myself the man of the family. I always respected my mother, right? My parents never used drugs, neither one of them. They were more or less scared of drugs. There's an interesting story. My father told me as a forest firefighter that he actually worked at Woodstock as a forest firefighter. And I remember hearing as a kid, him come back and talking to my mother and saying there was acid everywhere. And I was only like 4 or 5 years old at the time. And in my head, I was thinking the only acid I knew was battery acid. And it scared the hell out of me. I was like, why is there this, because I knew a little bit about, don't touch bad batteries. It's going to burn your hands, stuff like that. As you're young. And I was terrified. I didn't understand it, but I was scared of it, right? And what did I end up doing? My parents told me to stay away from drugs. Don't do it. And I ended up becoming a full-blown heroin and crack addict. I wasn't stupid. My parents didn't use. There was no history of drug abuse in my family. When I go back and I think about it, I think actually the fear of people telling me, you see where I'm going with this? The rebellion, wanting to learn for myself. I remember people telling me that you'll get hooked if you just use it one time. And I started using and experimented not because I felt bad about myself, but because I felt good about myself, because I was confident in myself. I felt that I was a little stronger, a little smarter, a little everything more than other kids. I did. I thought I could mess around with it. And I was curious. Here's another story. I remember the critical race theory reminds me of sex education. Going back in the 70s, the parents, oh my God, you don't want to, that's not supposed to be in the schools. This should be taught at home or on the streets where we learned it as kids. The parents used to say that. And I remember, this isn't something I'm proud of, but I remember shoplifting a book called The Joy of Sex when I was about 12 or 13 years, it's probably about 11 or 12 years old. I stuck it down my pants just to see what all this was about. Kids are drawn to things that if you tell them that it's bad for them, it's a natural human part of growing up, of becoming a man, becoming an adult, of taking those first steps. In other words, what I'm trying to say here is look at this from the kids' point of view. They see these politicians, all these uptight old guys in the suits and ties, looking like a bunch of old fogies, along with their parents, telling them that they can't learn this. This is dangerous for you guys. It's going to make you feel bad about yourselves. Think about this. Really think about when you were a kid. Would that scare you away? Or would you actually want to turn around and learn more about it? I really believe that if these conservative and Trumpers and Republicans had just left well enough alone and made a big deal out of it, and critical race theory was taught in schools, the kids would look at it just like another course. And you know what? They'd be tested on it or whatever, and a year later, they probably wouldn't be able to tell you anything about it. Just like it was, they were teaching about Magellan discovering South America or wherever Magellan discovered. Need I say more? You tell kids they can't, especially something's bad for them. And like I said, I was scared of drugs. And my parents, and I inherited that fear of drugs from my parents. But it made me curious about it. And I ended up using, and I ended up becoming an addict. I was a good kid. Like I said, addiction didn't run in my family. Don't get me wrong here now. I'm not comparing drugs and the critical race theory. It's the idea of trying to keep things from kids. Kids are, they're smart, and this is just a normal part of growing up. They're going to be curious about this. They're going to be a lot more curious, and they're going to want to find out what all this is about critical race theory, more than if they just put it as a regular course in school and nobody even, they just let them teach it or not teach it or whatever. The kids would have been bored of it, and it would have been forgotten. But no. They had to make a big deal out of it. Now, I guarantee you, the kids who come from the families where the parents and everybody around them are making a big deal about this, that it's dangerous, it's going to indoctrinate the kids, those kids are going to want to know all that much more about why it's dangerous for them. It's just human nature. I can't believe Republicans, the conservatives, the people that are still screaming about this, they're actually just firing up kids' curiosity all that much more. Think about it. I got a good video coming up talking about drugs. I had an interesting experience with lysergic acid dithiamide. I think that's, the initials. I actually wrote a 20-page term paper on that when I was in a junior in high school. And I wrote it from experience. And I have some interesting, crazy stories to tell you about. Not condoning drug use in any way, but just something you guys are going to find amazing in the next video. All right, you guys have a great Tuesday. I'll be back shortly.